Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe, a podcast where you'll get to learn from the experts in the field of sex, love, and relationships. The mission of the Sex Talk Cafe is to normalize the conversation on sexuality while building a bridge between the sexual and spiritual. I'm your host, Susan Morgan Taylor. I'm a holistic sex therapist, intuitive coach, and specialist in women's sexuality and feminine spirituality. I'm the founder and CEO of the Pathway to Pleasure Collective, where I help women and couples around the world restore intimacy, save their relationship, and get back to love without feeling like they have to sacrifice themselves just to keep their partner happy. Thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the Sex Talk Cafe. Welcome, everybody, to the Sex Talk Cafe. I'm very excited to introduce my guest today, Dr. Liat Yakir, who is an expert on the science of love and relationship. And today we're going to be talking about some very fascinating topics having to do with the biology of love. And I just think this topic is so fascinating, but we're going to get into that conversation here in a minute. Before we dive in, Dr. Yakir, I'd love to give you an opportunity just to introduce yourself. Tell our listeners a little bit about you, who you are, what you do.
Yeah, sure. So hi, Susan. I'm very glad to be here. So my name is Liat Yakir. I'm a biologist. I have a PhD in genetics and a postdoc in genetics from the Weizmann Institute in Israel. My master studies in the hormone research, and today I study and really talk a lot about the science behind the love and all our other emotions, the evolutionary roots of the human behavior. This is what interests me.
Wonderful. And now you have a book that you wrote too, because I did have a chance to check that out. So I'm going to be referencing that during our conversation today. What's the name of the book for our listeners?
It is called A Brief History of Love, about the science of love. Yes.
Yes, the science of love. And I just find this topic so fascinating. I have to admit, though, when I downloaded the audiobook and when I was listening to it, it really takes some of the romance out, right? We think of love as so, it's this romantic, magical thing, and it's very sort of nebulous. And what you really do in your book, which I think is really brilliant and fascinating, you really break it down to the actual biology of what's actually happening in our hormones, in our physiology. And I find that really interesting. So I would love for you maybe just to talk a little bit about this. What is love? When we're talking about the biology of love or the science of love, what are we actually talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of people tell me that it takes out the romance when you talk about the brain and the hormones. But I think on the contrary, I think that if we understand the operating system and if we understand how our body works and how our brain works, we can have much, healthier and happier love life and to be more connected once we understand the science. So, and also I myself had struggles with my love life. Yes, I had a few husbands and it always starts as a fairy tale, and then something happens. And then I start to wonder if it happens to me and it happens to all other people. And so if it's universal, it must be rooted in our biology. So I went into this research, to gather all the insights from hundreds of research. What is love scientifically? Because this subject drives us so much, and we think about and we deal with this emotion from the moment we come to this world. So we should understand better. So love, the word love comes from Sanskrit, and it means lubaya. It's to go crazy. To become crazy. Yeah, this is the meaning of the word.
That's fascinating.
And so for me, it's very interesting because we gave a name only to one stage of this process that is called love. We gave a name only to this infatuation stage, when you fall in love and the butterflies in the belly and you feel this, feelings of romance. And we have other stages if we think about as a process. We first have the last part, the attraction, what makes us be attracted to some people and not others. So we have the attraction stage, and then we have this infatuation, the falling in love, which lasts very short, between 6 hours to 2 years. This is the stage. And then we have the long-lasting monogamous pair bonding. And in every stage, we have different hormones that plays in our head and in our body. And so at the first stage, the attraction stage is mainly testosterone and estrogen that have this interplay, and they attract each other, even in the same-sex couples. So we are attracted to testosterone or to estrogen and all the signs of fertility, and basically our genes programmed our brain to diversify the genes from an evolutionary point of view. So we are attracted to strong, healthy, good genes, people with good genes. And then we have the infatuation stage, where mainly we have the hormones of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, adrenaline, which in the drugs field, it's like ecstasy and cocaine. It's very potent drug. MDMA, it's very potent drug. So we feel this euphoria and these feelings of happiness. And then in the attachment stage, in the long-lasting pair bond, we are mainly stayed with oxytocin, because the dopamine drops when you have the same stimuli, the same person, the same touch, the same skin, the same kiss. The brain become, tolerant. We have this tolerance effect.
Yeah, exactly right. Sexual satiety, also the Coolidge effect. I know you mentioned that in your book, and I've read a lot about that, which is sort of that habituation, also called sexual habituation, where we just sort of get like acclimated to our partner, and we lose a lot of that. Those feelings that we had at the beginning of a relationship are then kind of no longer there. And I think it's really funny. The Sanskrit word, what did you say it was again? The Sanskrit word for love, and it means
Lubaya. It's to go crazy.
You go crazy. Yeah. And it does kind of feel like that at the beginning. I mean, personally, like that's kind of an intense stage. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I wish we had that again. But like, do you really want to live in that eternally? Like, it's kind of a lot. I think it's funny too, because I work with a lot of couples in my practice, and people always want more. They want passion, and passion actually means suffering. It means to suffer. I think that's the Latin root, is to suffer. So it's really interesting that that's the name that we give for love, and also we think we want passion, but passion means to suffer. And there is an aspect of suffering, I believe, when those hormones are so intense, and then it can really lead to a lot of like not so great outcomes, which I think you mentioned in your own story. You said you've been through a few marriages. I don't think that's uncommon. I mean, I've been through one myself, and a lot of relationships that didn't work out. Well, what's the hope for us though? I mean, if it just, so if things change, maybe you could talk about the, how would couples like get that spark back, so to speak, on a biological level? If they've been in a long-term committed relationship and the spark has kind of died out, what is your recipe for helping couples really be able to kind of revive some of that? Because we don't want to just people get bored. They get habituated, they get bored, and then they start to seek novelty or seek outside the relationship. And unless you're in an open relationship, I know that's a very popular thing these days, but a lot of people, that's not what they want for the relationship. So what's your recipe for helping couples really keep things juicy and alive for the long term?
Yes, this is the million-dollar question. Because we have this wiring, which means that we are not essentially, from biological perspective, a monogamous creature. We are not. We are between polygamists or social monogamists. We have this wiring that makes us cheat on each other or watch porn or seek for novelty. It's the dopamine, the novelty-seeking hormone. So we have this conflict that from one side we want this butterfly, that these butterflies comes from stress response, that you don't know. The passion comes from the uncertainty. When you have somebody new, you don't know if he will love you, he wants you, he will stay tomorrow, he won't, when you will meet, how you will meet. You have no certainty, and this uncertainty gives a lot of adrenaline and cortisol and excitement. And once we have a long-term relationship, for the benefits of the offspring, we seek for stability, security, emotional support to give to our offspring. So basically, we come here for reproduction. So there are a lot of benefits from monogamy, Yeah, we want this stability, but we also want this excitement. So how how exactly we manage this conflict, because basically we are a family creature. We live in clans. We need a lot of oxytocin, not only from the partner. So this is first. We need these hormones not only from the partner. And if we think that the partner can provide us all our needs and all the excitement, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the adrenaline, all the happy hormones from one person, it's a lot of burden and it won't happen.
Yeah.
So we understand that we have some needs that we get from the partner and other needs that we can get from others. And oxytocin, it doesn't have to be only sex. It can be good relationships and hobbies and excitement from, to get this dopamine from other activities that we have with other people. We are social creatures. We need, community of sport and community of another hobby or to go out to trips. And this brings me to the second tip, which is being together but also apart. Because when we are apart, the brain goes reset. We do this reset to the satiety effect, the Coolidge effect. When they found it in animals, in mice, that you give the female and the male to be with each other all the time to orgasm will be longer until they won't have interest in one another. So this is how they found the satiety effect. But when you take the female and the male and you set them apart for 1 week, they will recognize each other as new. So when we are apart from each other, we get the decrease in dopamine.
Got it. And I'm curious, I want to ask you a question about that. And I know that you've got another tip here as part of this process, but I have had this experience happen to myself personally, and I've had some clients ask me about this as well. And I really would love to see what your take is on this. When sometimes what happens, couples, when they're breaking up and getting back together, and breaking up and getting back together, and then the sex is like really freaking great, and there's this huge attraction as soon as they break up. Can you talk about what is going on? What's happening with our hormones, with our biology? What is causing that?
You get the adrenaline back because we had the stability. And now we don't have the stability. The ship is rocking and we don't know if we'll stay together, we won't stay together. So we start to see the partner as stranger again. Maybe he will go with another person. Jealousy is good for sex. It's very good for sex because it gets the adrenaline higher. When you even imagine your partner with another person, you start to feel sexually aroused by that. Again, we are social creatures and we appreciate each other by how others appreciate us. Like if I see my partner with a lot of girls, women wants him, I start to be aroused by that because it means that he's the alpha male and everybody wants to touch him and everybody wants to be with him. So this becoming a stranger again gives back the uncertainty and the instability, which gives us all the good hormones for the sexual arousal. And that's why we break up and then come again. And we need this to stop the familiarity, when a person is not predictable anymore. I don't know if he will come tonight, how he will come and what he will say, and maybe he will call, maybe he won't call. We break this routine. The routine is... So in the Jewish tradition, there is a custom, it's called nida, that during the menstrual cycle, the couple cannot touch each other, cannot have sex. So you have like 2 weeks that you cannot touch your partner. So you have this reset. I don't practice it, but you don't touch each other. But I think this is the secret for monogamy, like in the Jewish tradition. Like, the men cannot touch the women cannot touch the men. It's like in the Bible.
Well, and I understand that as well from a more of like a tantric perspective. If we're looking at energy, And what part of what creates that spark sexually, obviously the hormone piece, which you're bringing us today, but also there's sort of this aspect of the polarities, right? Of positive and negative, or yin and yang, masculine, feminine, alpha, omega. And what can happen a lot of times with couples is they neutralize because they're together so much, they're touching all the time. So I know that, I have even like recommended that as a practice with some of my couples of like just sleep in separate bedrooms for a week.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't have to mean anything. We make that mean something, right? Like, oh my God, our relationship must be for disaster if we're not sleeping in the same bed. But having that separation, or even I know some couples that even like they sleep with like a pillow between them. They don't touch at night. And they do this on purpose because they know they work from their perspective. It's like an energy aspect, right? Like not having constant contact helps them kind of keep some of that the tension in the relationship, so to speak. And I think that's what you're speaking to. It's a little bit of that mystery and the excitement of not knowing, like, so that when they do finally come together, there's a real electric charge that's there, which obviously has also to do with our brain chemicals. But yeah, and I think that's really neat. And I think there's a lot of wisdom, in the Judaic tradition, really. I mean, there's a lot of great things that come from that. And that's a
Yes.
really interesting piece. Yeah.
Yes, it's very interesting, but we can do it without, we have to have this tradition just to have, but it's also to be a part, like, different hobbies, different friends. I know a lot of couples that do everything together. They stay together all the time. They go together to every social event. Yeah. And no, we need this little bit of jealousy, little bit of mystery that I don't know where he's going. He go for 3 days for a trip, and I have this uncertainty. So of course I will be angry, and not be afraid of anger. Anger and fighting in a relationship is good. It's very good. It's adrenaline. Yeah. Because when everything is calm and everything is peaceful and the person is so predictable, and I know that everything will be rosy, and the couples that fight a lot have better sex usually. But you have to know how to fight. Yeah, it's very, very important to reconcile, like after 1.5 hours, not more than that.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Why is that? What's the time frame? Where does that come from?
It's come from cortisol levels in our blood. It rises when we fight. It's like cortisol, adrenaline, and testosterone, which this is the sexual drive hormone. Yes. So we have testosterone, like fighting, like, ego fights or why you did this. It's like a power struggles. It's good to have power struggles. Yes, because power struggles means testosterone. But all these hormones get higher and higher. And during the conflict, we raise also the cortisol, like we feel stress in the situation. And cortisol can stay in the blood until 15 minutes. It can, before it disables.
Okay. We said 50, 50?
Yeah, 50, up to 50. Like
up to 50 minutes in the blood. Okay.
50 minutes, it can stay very high in the blood. And when it's high, I can never say I'm sorry. You cannot. You are in a fight or flight position. You cannot reconcile. So you have to let it decrease to relax, to be more relaxed, and then go back to the connection, to the bond. Say good words like, I'm sorry, I love you, I understand you, I see your point, empathic words, and you're right. I can see your point, maybe not 100%. But
use communication tools, some of those good communication tools that we learn when we work with professionals, like
reconciliation gesture. It's like, can be, arm or touch, hand in hand, but come back to the bond, not, to stay in this cortisol mode.
Well, but what happens? Yeah. And so, and I'm curious about that. First of all, I agree with you. Like when I see couples are like, we never fight. Well, I mean, kind of wonder your sex life sucks, Right. I mean, you have to have some of that energetic release, or it's just literally it's being shut down, or it's just neutral. They're just neutralized, and there's no erotic charge left anymore. So I always look at that piece also. Is that all of our emotions are tied into our sexual expression, our life force energy. If you look at it that way, obviously they're related to the hormones too. But there's life force energy that our emotions are connected to, which are highly correlated with our sex drive, our libido, our lust for life. And so if that certain aspects of our emotions aren't given some space within the relationship, then indicative of that we're going to siphon off our sexual energy and that sexual charge. So I totally agree with that. We need to be able to not be so afraid of some of those emotions and the anger. And again, you're right. We have to be able to know how to repair, and also kind of knowing how to not have a total shit show. We are fighting, right? Because you can really screw things up and damage the relationship. But why? So I get the cortisol is still in the blood for up to 50 minutes, but you said that the repair should happen within.
So women are harder to reconcile.
Oh, it stays longer in women. How longer? How much longer? Why is that?
He doesn't understand why we fight. Yeah, usually. What's the fight is all about? Like Gottman said, it's like 80% of the conflicts between couples. It's the women, but it's the women because we have higher levels of cortisol and stress, like two to three times. Women have more anxiety and depression and stress levels because of the empathy. You take on yourself the problems of your children, the problems of your parents, the problem of the world. You take on your shoulders, and we also have the stress response of phone. It's called phone. It's tend and befriend, to satisfy others, to satisfy the environment, in the workplace and at home. So we come home with a lot of cortisol, a lot of stress.
Interesting. Yeah.
A lot of stress.
Well, but why an hour and a half? So why not reconcile like the next day? Like, why do you think it's important to come back within an hour and a half?
Because when we stay, high with cortisol is decreased by oxytocin. Like when you come back to the touch and look in each other's eyes and kiss and feel connected, you relax.
I see.
So if you don't have this relaxation, this reconciliation, so you have this oxytocin gets the cortisol down, and it doesn't matter if there will be sex that in this moment, because sometimes you still feel, the anger, but it means just that we can calm each other, and the calmness comes from this carousel of hormones.
It makes sense because, like sometimes after you have you overcome a conflict with your partner, like you feel deeper, you feel more bonded. You're like, oh, we had this rough thing that happened and we overcame it. And then like you feel like the bond is stronger. And so that's a function of oxytocin. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So we are in this, this carousel of hormones. Like we come from work, we come from, taking care of the children with a lot of we have many stress factors in the modern era. It's like the stress era. So, and our automatic mechanism is to put the anger on other people. So it calms us down. When we shout, when we yell at other people, afterwards we feel better. But the other person doesn't feel so good, but we feel better. We have this mechanism. So if we understand the mechanism of fighting and that it's just a way to calm down, we totally understand it, with teenagers, that they take all their anger on us, and then this what calms them down, and they know that you're my mother, so you will forgive me because I'm in this moody time of my life. But it's the same in a family, like in partnership, that we take the anger on each other, but this calms us down, and we wish for the other person, to hold us. Let me take out all this stress and calm me down, help me to calm down, because we not necessarily we need another nervous system to relax.
To regulate us. And it's so interesting. And it absolutely makes sense with our children and teenagers. And I have one that fits that description exactly. And I understand it that way. However, when and I remember this part in your book where you were talking about this. And I thought, wow, that's really eye-opening, because I've always felt that is the case. I think where that becomes a problem, though, is in long-term relationships, or that's the way the person soothes themselves, is through the explosions of anger. It's really destructive. I mean, I have personal experience with that, and it can really bring a relationship down. And I wonder, like, what would your recommendation be if that's someone's main way of de-stressing? Like, how do they reconcile that to actually maybe have some other ways of getting that tension out other than destroying the relationship?
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you totally, because we don't need to be, the to be the sack of the anger for the other people, for the other partner to put everything on us. But I mean that's why I think it's very, very important in a long-term relationship to learn to fight, because we have this skill from home. We learn how to fight with our parents and in our families. And we bring this, and different people live in different houses. There is one house that yells, everybody yells at each other all the time. And in another household, you have to be quiet. You don't have, you don't raise your voice. And then these two comes together and you have this, fighting skills in your nervous system, and it can be frightening for the other person. So this is first, we need to learn the fighting skill and the nervous system of our partner, because it was wired long ago, long before we met them. And the other thing is, if we see that, the anxiety and the stress and the anger that comes out of the person, of our partner, is really high, in high levels, and we cannot calm down. So we need to understand that there is something more. I mean, there may be a trauma, maybe an unsolved issue, and this is the time for treatment, because otherwise the bond will break up eventually. You cannot hold the anger of the other person for life. Of course, it's not it's not the deal.
Yeah, it's so true. And the other piece on this is there is that term, like, learning how to fight. And I know Gottman talks about fair fighting. If anyone doesn't know who John Gottman is, couples research, done a lot of really great work. But that's a great concept, but where would one go to learn how to fight? I mean, right? Is there like an online course that someone could take? Like, where do people learn these skills? Because it's one thing to talk about and say that's what we should do, but then how do we actually do that? What are the rules of fighting? I don't know if you have the answer to this either, but where would somebody start if they wanted to work on this?
I think first thing is to sit on a conversation, not on the content of the fighting, but on the the know-how of the fighting, like how we fight, what makes you relax and what makes me relax, what I need during a fight, what are the signs, because when the amygdala, the stress will be fired, we cannot think rationally. So we should do this conversation when we calm, when we are in vacation, or after sex, like the patterns of the fighting, not the content. The content is the same, also Gottman said it's like 60-70% recycling of the fighting. So mainly it's how we fight, and what are the triggers. What are my triggers? What are my partner triggers? What are the words that, because we know each other trigger consciously or unconsciously, and we touch it all the time. So like a curious conversation about our brain, like our brain on fighting. What makes us calm? Like, if I understand that, my partner, his automatic response is to shut down. To go to another room, and I feel so lonely when he does this, and I feel so when we talk about these feelings. So it's like negotiation. How can but once the person explain what do you feel when we fight, what do you feel when I say this word. So I mean, it's conversation by conversation, like one day after a fight, instead of putting it down, like shoving it under the carpet, like it didn't happen. Let's do the analysis, the meta-analysis about the fight, about the hormones, about the brain, about the nervous system, and what each one of us needs, and so like, if from a fight to fight, we will reconciliate. The time to conciliation will be shortened. This is the goal, not to stop fighting. No way.
Right. But learning, that makes a lot more sense. Like learning how to, so I talk, a lot about, like you say, the content of the fight, which is like the thing that happened. And that's where I see a lot of couples get really stuck there. Like, well, you didn't put the toilet paper back on the roll after this, and you left your tooth, and it's the content. And that's not really the thing that it's even usually about, but it's also the how you're actually engaging in it. Like which means the process, like what you actually do. right? Not what it's about, not the topic of the fight, but like what you actually do in a fight. And what you're saying is that's the place to look first, right? What are the triggers? What's your body feeling? What are your habits? Do you shut down? Do you explode right away? And then having a conversation about that when you're not in a fight, like a nice calm conversation. I notice this, and when you do that, I feel this. And then hopefully when you're activated again, being able to maybe do things a little bit differently. Is that the idea
Yeah,
with
yeah,
learning how
even
to
a little
fight?
bit
Okay.
different. Maybe even ask the questions of what do you need from me right now, or what do you feel right now?
Okay, yeah.
Needs. Like it's not really about the toilet paper. It's not really about the sandals of the children. It's like, what do you need? And also when like to say, when I say leave me alone, I don't mean I don't want to be alone.
Right, right,
I
right. You
mean
want
that
the
you
connection.
come and you will say, how can I help you? What do you need right now? And the most important thing is, I think if the fighting is a call for help, it's a call for expressing emotions and
Mm.
to give me a space to express my emotions. Somebody
Ah,
will ask me, what happens to you today? What do you feel? What do you need? And then I can be, to rewire again to my gut feeling, to my emotions and say, yes, I feel frustrated. I feel sad. I saw horrors in the television. I feel sorry. I went to someone's house and I heard, and we need a space to talk about our needs and also the needs from the partner.
yeah.
Uh,
And that will help with the oxytocin
Communication.
production, correct? Like that will help the bonding hormone to come back online so we can neutralize cortisol and come
Yeah.
back in connection. I love that.
Oxytocin is released in empathy, in empathic
How?
conversation. Empathic conversation that someone listen to my
Yeah.
pain. This is
Someone
empathy.
listening to your pain. And in order to do that too, by the way, we have to have our prefrontal cortex online. Like we can't be trapped in the amygdala, in our fight or flight mode with cortisol just rushing through our system. So that's what you're saying. We need to come back to at least some kind of a baseline, but come back more quickly, like not take 2 days, come back within an hour and a half when cortisol levels are reduced, and then really get that oxytocin to come back in to help the bond strengthen again. I love that.
Yeah. Yes. I think
Uh,
another tip is
okay, go
is
ahead.
about the sex life is less criticism, because
Yeah.
when we criticize the partner and we undervalue him or her, we lose the sexual attraction. We are sexually attracted to people in higher status.
Uh,
We live in hierarchy. Testosterone makes us look for someone better, for higher status. And when we criticize our partner all the time and we undervalue each other, like treating my husband like a small child, yeah, he can
yeah.
do nothing, he don't know how to. So I won't be sexually attracted. And we know that the sexual attraction for women to their husband um, decreases much faster than the sexual drive of the men to the women.
Yeah.
So women have this, we have this fragile sexual drive.
Mm,
Not every woman is the same like the other, but our sexual drive is very fragile, and it depends on our stress level. Stress decreases the sexual drive. It
mm,
depends on how we appreciate our partner, how we appreciate the other person, because we are animals, like females all around nature. They look
yeah.
for the alpha male. Yeah, they look for the charismatic, the beautiful, the strong, the provider. So if we undervalue our partner, we won't be attracted to him anymore, or
Yeah.
to her anymore.
Well, I love that you brought this up because that's actually where I was going to lead this conversation next because I love in your book how you do talk about the difference between men and women are different, obviously. We have just a different set of hormones running throughout. Yes, we have a lot of similarities, but I'm not in the camp that says men and women are the same. There's no differences and we should just all act like we're the same and treat each other the same. I don't believe that. I truly believe we are different. And I think that knowing our differences actually is a really beautiful thing, that we can have more powerful connections when we understand that and when we understand how we're wired. However, it kind of sounds like we're screwed, like not literally, but like figuratively in the ways that we're different. I would love to hear you talk about like specifically when it comes to sex. What
Yes.
are we facing in terms of how women are wired and how men are wired sexually?
Okay. Wow. there the difference is huge because us again we think we need to see it in evolutionary perspective. Males are sperm machines. This is what they are. They are sperm machines in nature. So they see a female in heat. The wiring says, attack now, take it now, like 6 minutes to ejaculation. That's it, because
That's
a
even a long
predator will
time
come.
for some. I mean,
Yeah.
it's more like 2 minutes or 30 seconds in
Yeah.
some cases.
Yeah, I took like 6 minutes, between 2 minutes to 6 minutes, because a predator will come, another male will come. You have very short time period to do it,
That makes sense.
so the whole system is wired for that, is programmed for that,
Yeah.
in the so, and the female, especially like the women system, is totally different. So we have our sex drive especially high in when estrogen is high in the ovulation period. Women talk about sex more, want sex more during the ovulation period. We still have heat, yes. We conceal it, but we still have heat. And stress in men can make this stress response that is called fornicate, wanting to have sex, like a way to calm down, a way to regulate the stress by ejaculation and by having sex. The porn is based on this.
Yes.
It's one of the stress response. We don't have fornicate. Usually, some women do, but usually this is not our stress response. It will be more freeze or fight or flight, but not go around and find males. It's not good for us, because in nature there is no anti-pregnancy pills. There is no
Sure.
yeah. So every session will end up in a pregnancy and labor, and it's not good for females to have many partners. No, it's not good. And so the male system is built different, and we don't need 6 minutes. We need much longer in order to even be receptive for the partner. It's not right. And we don't use it mainly as not, especially not the I forgot the word.
Like stress
penetration. The penetration.
Oh, okay.
We are not calmed down by penetration. When we are calmed down by sex, is by the contact, the touch, the massage, the touch on the erotic places and the in the genitalia.
I don't know. I must be wired differently. I must be wired differently. All the touch stuff, but I mean the penetration. I gotta have that. That does, it grounds me. It just calms me down. So I must be an outlier.
But it takes time. Yeah, I agree with you. The penetration is also feels.
Yeah, no, you're right. The warming up of the body, getting all the anatomy engorged and ready until the body's really like, yes, I want that part. Yeah, absolutely. We need more time. And I think what's your research show? I've read 21 or more minutes of foreplay and warming up the body before a woman will be more consistently orgasmic during sex. And that's measuring climax, which I don't necessarily think is the best measure of successful sex. But what's your research show on that in terms of how much time on average is needed?
For women, I don't know exactly. I cite a lot of research. I don't know exactly about this, but I know that the prefrontal cortex of men is shut down when they are sexually aroused. But it's not the same as for women. It's not. Women, the prefrontal cortex will shut down only during the orgasm.
Orgasm, so yeah, I've heard that.
Time for us to get to orgasms because we have all this.
Just shut the brain off, like the thinking mind, and that's interesting too because that's our empathy center, right? The prefrontal cortex, and so we're worried about what's he thinking about me? Is he having a good time? Am I too loud? Do I smell like? Oh,
How do
are
I
the
look? How is
okay?
my legs and my hips and my belly?
Right.
And
So
the
that's
children
interesting.
at the
And the
next.
kids, yeah, yeah. And so it just takes, that's so interesting that it takes that amount of time, a certain amount of time for that part of our brain to actually quiet down so we can go into our pleasure center, which is the parasympathetic nervous system and the more primal brain. That just is easier for men to shut that off. And that's really due to hormones. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay,
This
wow.
testosterone really decrease the activity in the prefrontal cortex, and that's why the levels of empathy of men is usually smaller than women. Uh, so all this ends up in our sex life. Like we have differences, a lot of differences. So sometimes we hear in long-term pair bond relationship that, some women say that, okay, I will give him what he wants, so
Hmm.
he will be calm.
Yeah,
And, we forget to enjoy the process. Yes, what I need in the process and not
right.
another. Because if something becomes, another errand that I need
Yeah.
to do in the house, like to calm down my partner because we didn't have sex for 1 week or
Right.
2 weeks or 3 weeks, and so we lose the oxytocin in the process.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, because right, like it's a lot about like what's in it for her, right? Like she's turned it into this thing to do on the to-do list, just keep him happy. And there's this myth out there that women don't enjoy sex as much as men, which I do not agree with. It's just that we're wired differently. And so like I think you said this at the very beginning, once we understand this, then we can actually work with it instead of having it just feel like this curse.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So if she's just giving him sex to keep him happy, there's not oxytocin happening. The bonding hormone doesn't happen. No kidding. So
He's just
how,
taking care of his testosterone or cortisol, because when men doesn't have sex like 4 days, really the brain start to think about it all the time, or
yeah,
at least 5 times more than women think about sex, because in the penis there are 360 million uh, sperm cells ready for launch every minute. Yeah, every minute, because I
that's a
told you
lot.
it's a sperm machine. And if it doesn't come out in 3 days, it goes back to the prostate gland and goes back into the tissue, and it's not a good, it's not a healthy and not a good, can cause prostate cancer if
Hmm.
there
I'm
will be.
curious about that because there's other, so that's no, and I respect your research and your scientific perspective on that because there's also other perspectives on that, which is actually a Taoist sexual practice or a tantric sexual practice of refraining from ejaculating or orgasming without the ejaculation. So do you know much about that and what the impacts of that are? Because there's some practitioners of that who have had very different experiences with actually smoothing out some of that craving for ejaculation and sort of the constant need to get off, so to speak. And it actually has created more of the bonding with their partner. They feel more bonded. They're more focused. Do you have any knowledge on that from your research?
The tantric method is genius. Yes, of course, it's
Oh,
genius.
okay. What do you
Yeah,
think
yeah,
about that?
yeah.
Like
No,
how so?
no,
How
no
is
doubt
that?
about it. Yeah, for the reconciliation between the female brain and the male brain, tantra is the recipe. Like, that men will learn or will be able to hold this
Okay.
urge to ejaculation, and of course I guess I don't know if they did long-term research on tantric men, how it
Mhm.
affects the prostate, because I guess that you get a lot of benefits from it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think some of it is the you don't want the energy, sexual energy to stagnate in the genitals. So I think that if men are practicing that, they need to understand some of the breath work that's connected, associated with that practice and how to not just leave it all like in the genitals. And I think that's where men get problems with the prostate cancer.
Exactly.
Sedentary jobs, they're sitting all the time, they're not exercising, they're not actually moving that energy through the body, which is I know that's part of that practice. So I would imagine that that is a really, really important piece if you're going to be taking on that practice to actually make sure that you're circulating that sexual energy, not just letting it stagnate in the genitals. And that would be the aspect that would lead to the health challenges if you were not
Yes.
ejaculating every 3 days or whatever.
Yes, exactly. But you get the orgasm. So the thing is that it doesn't matter if there is ejaculation or not, but the
Mm,
orgasm makes the partner, the couple come together. This oxytocin that is secreted during the orgasm is it's what makes so it's so important to to have these negotiations of how sex because it's not all about penetration. If it will be all about
yeah.
penetration, women will not be able to get the full oxytocin capacity that you can get from
Uh,
this
right. Like you need to touch
relationship.
other parts of the body, like not just go straight for the genitals and straight immediately to penetration and expect her to love it and want
Yes,
to
it
do you
even
again the
starts
next day.
before when you talk with each other. Even start before that, you have this conversation, this empathic conversation, that you really want to understand what is going on with her, what happened to her today, what she takes on her shoulders, what are her burdens and her, because the secretion of oxytocin for women especially starts in the speech,
Uh,
start in the eye contact and in the speaking about emotions. When we talk about emotions, we secrete this lovely hormone and we get bond. Like when you go out with a friend, you usually talk about, she will ask you what happening in your life, and you start to, and this what makes us bond when we talk about our emotions, because usually men, their conversations are more reporting, they talk about,
like very
politics.
direct and to the point, like one word, a short
Oh,
sentence, not a
short
paragraph.
sentences, and not don't talk too much about it, because also as a society we don't teach our boys to talk a lot or to express
Mm,
their emotions. It's like, stay calm, stay cool, be the tough boss, tough guy. Don't show
yeah.
your, yeah, don't complain about your life
Right.
or what happens to you, and be
Yeah, there's
strong.
sure. And there's also some research that I've come across around that. And I'm curious if you've heard of this or know of it, that there's different ways that like how men get clarity and like they is actually by shoving emotion down and like getting the job done or pulling away and like being in the cave on the mountain kind of thing. And then they get clarity that way. Whereas how we get it is actually through bottoming out, like through our, like feeling our emotions fully, like totally letting loose, feeling it fully. And then we kind of get the clarity that we're seeking. And then we seek also to talk, like we'll get oxytocin production through bonding, like talking about, this happened today, like you were saying, like talking about our problems with other women or with our partners. Is that true in your research as well? Have you come across that we're just sort of different in terms of how men and women
Yes,
get that clarity and
yes.
get access to our intuition? It's very different for women than it is for men. It's not so much feeling based for men.
Yeah, there are some research that shows it, and it basically goes down to this testosterone and its effect on other hormones. Testosterone blocks receptors of oxytocin, and yeah, it blocks, and also in the males. In males, we have different version of oxytocin. They also secrete oxytocin, but also vasopressin. Vasopressin is a cousin of the family of oxytocin. Just one amino acid is changed. It's like the oxytocin is 9 amino acid and one is changed in the vasopressin. And it is more connected to feelings of, protectiveness and territory, protecting the territory. So we see this difference also in men and women when how they, provide to the offspring or take
Yeah.
care of the offsprings. So the women will talk more with the offsprings and they try to understand what their feelings and let them cry and let them take out their, and yeah, the fathers will like be more protective of the family, of the women and the children,
Uh,
and not letting anyone to, to intrude or to, so we have these hormones, and it's not by mistake that,
It's
we
really
see.
beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I think that highlighting these differences, like on the one hand, it's like, oh my gosh, we're screwed. Like, how do we ever navigate through these differences? But on the other hand, it's a really beautiful, there's a real harmony in it. And biologically speaking, from an evolutionary standpoint, that these things were wired in us for very good reasons. And I think probably where the challenges start to come in is in our modern day, where we're trying, first of all, to erase the differences between men and women and genders all mixed up and confused. And also women have very different roles today. I mean, we work outside the home. Some of us choose not to have children, or we choose same-sex partners, like that don't fit into sort of the traditional heterosexual relationships. And all that's really wonderful. But I think that can also, I think it can create a lot of confusion. And we do need to wrap up our conversation here, but maybe in closing, you can just share a little bit about your vision for how do we reconcile this in the modern day where evolution and procreation isn't really our main drive anymore for intimate relationships?
Yes. So I would say also in the same-sex couples that relationships, that it's again a play of testosterone and estrogen. Usually, we are, even in the same sex, we attracted to different from us. Yes, to the one with the more testosterone or the one with the more estrogen. We see this feminine and masculine also in the same sex. So I see it as a play, as a dance between these two hormones in all our relationships,
Okay.
romantic relationships. So this knowledge is for all relationships, as I see it, because we see the same patterns also in same sex couples. So I think in the modern era, yeah, we have problem. We have a shortage of oxytocin, especially a deficiency, also because the technology and that we work a lot more than before, like also working from home, working from the workplace. And so my belief is that today more than ever, we need to be connected to our biology, because our biology didn't change and it won't change. Evolution is not working in this, time periods of 100 years. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So our brain is basically, like it was 50, 100 years ago. It didn't change. So the one thing that changed is we are overloaded with cortisol because we don't live the way our brain is wired. Like we are exposed to cheap dopamine everywhere, like shopping
Yeah.
and porn and Netflix, or in fast food.
Yeah.
So we are and we are very easy to addiction, to be addicted to all this dopamine, and it really can harm our relationships and our connections. So
Mm.
I feel that we need to a little bit shut down with all the technology and all this the good things that the modern era gives us, but also there are disadvantages to this. And look at each other's eyes again, talk more, feel each other more. We are need this skin to skin so much. We
Yeah.
didn't change at all. We see
Mm.
humans all over. They gather together, they dance together, they stay with each other. They look in tribes. They sit close to each other. We need to touch one another.
Yes.
And
Oh,
in this world, we don't touch.
yeah.
Especially men can get they're from little age, they are being touched less than women.
Yes, and I mean, in this day and age, at least here in the United States, I mean, it's a dangerous world for men around touch and just kind of touch in general. And I absolutely agree with you. I think it's really about seeking that connection and growing relationships and bringing touch back in a way that's not connected with sexual acts. And we tend to associate touch only with sex, and then any kind of touch must be sexual. And then, it's blown up into all kinds of distorted things as well. And some of it's, very legitimate, but right, like getting back to that healthy connection and having touch and community be a part of that. I think that's a beautiful message for our listeners to take with them. And Dr. Yakir, I'd love to let you give our listeners a way to get in touch with you. How can people learn more? Please tell us how we can find you.
I have a website, liatyakir.com, and the book is in Amazon. And yes, I have
title of the book one more time for our audience.
A Brief History of Love.
A Brief History of Love by Dr. Liat Yakir. It's a wonderful book. I highly recommend my listeners, please go get on Amazon, get a copy of it, or get the Audible version. I learned so much. You cover so much ground in that book. And actually, you've got a great section on the whole online dating debacle.
Yeah.
Oh, fascinating. So please, anybody out there listening, if you want to improve your relationship and understand the biology that's happening in your relationship, and or you are looking for a relationship and are fed up with online dating, there's a reason for that. Dr. Yakir speaks to that in great depth in her wonderful, fabulous book. Great. Anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners before we finish today?
No, thank you. Yeah. Oxytocin for everyone.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Sex Talk Cafe.
Thank you, Susan. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for joining me today for the Sex Talk Cafe. Please be sure to show your support by subscribing to this podcast and sharing it with your friends. To keep in the loop on future events and happenings, and to grab your copy of our free ebook, The Pleasure Keys, 7 Secrets to Feminine Sexual Fulfillment, visit us online at pathwaytopleasure.com.